bright neon sign of Nightline with Trevor Vaughn flickered atop the grandiose studio in downtown Manhattan. It was one of the most watched late-night political talk shows, famous for its brash host, Trevor Vaughn, who thrived on controversy and viral moments. His audience wasn't just America, the entire world tuned in to watch him dismantle politicians, expose scandals, and pull no punches. But tonight's episode was different. The energy in the studio was electric, the anticipation thick in the air. The guest? None other than Pam Bondi, the United States Attorney General serving under President Donald Trump in this fictional timeline. Known for her sharp legal mind and fierce loyalty to the administration, she was both admired and despised, depending on which side of the political spectrum you stood. Trevor, in his signature navy blue suit, leaned back in his chair, adjusting his tie as he smirked at the cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest tonight. You know her, you have opinions about her, and trust me, we're about to get some real answers. Please welcome the U.S. Attorney General, Pam Bondi. The audience roared, half cheers, half boos. It didn't faze Pam. Dressed in a sleek black suit, she strode onto the stage with a confident smile, waving to the audience. If she was nervous, she didn't show it. She took her seat across from Trevor, crossing her legs, her hands clasped together neatly on the table. Trevor leaned forward, a smug glint in his eyes. Attorney General Bondi, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Pam returned his smile, but there was steel behind it. Pleasure's all mine, Trevor. I've been looking forward to this. The audience chuckled. The tension was already simmering. Trevor wasted no time. So let's get straight into it. You're working under President Trump. A lot of people, myself included, think this administration has been, let's say, ethically flexible. Tell me, how do you sleep at night knowing you're defending policies that many believe are borderline authoritarian? The audience gasped and cheered. Trevor sat back, his eyebrows raised, waiting for Pam to fumble. But she didn't. She smiled, tilted her head slightly, and delivered her first counterstrike. Oh, Trevor, I sleep just fine. But I do wonder how you sleep at night, considering how much misinformation you spread under the guise of entertainment. The audience reacted, half stunned, half thrilled. Trevor's grin faltered for just a second before he let out a chuckle. Oh, we're doing this, huh? Okay, let's play. He adjusted his microphone and turned to the audience. All right, let's talk specifics. The Immigration Reform Act, your administration's baby. Many legal experts have called it discriminatory, saying it unfairly targets non-European immigrants. How do you justify that? Pam didn't blink. I justify it the way any law is justified, by facts, not feelings. The act prioritizes merit-based immigration, something even previous Democratic leaders have advocated for. Our responsibility is to ensure national security and economic growth, not to appease social media outrage. Trevor shook his head. That's a convenient way to ignore the racial implications, isn't it? Pam's smile didn't waver. And it's convenient how you ignore the fact that America already has a selective immigration system. Or did you forget about the points-based system in Canada and Australia? Or does it only become racist when a Trump administration does it? The crowd murmured. A few loud cheers erupted. Trevor clicked his pen, eyes narrowing. Okay, but let's move to another topic. The media crackdown. Your Department of Justice has subpoenaed multiple journalists over supposed leaks. You claim it's about national security, but critics argue it's a direct attack on the free press. Is this administration afraid of the truth? Pam leaned forward slightly. Oh, come on, Trevor. You and I both know that there's a difference between free press and reckless endangerment. Leaks of classified information compromise national security. If a journalist publishes state secrets that put our soldiers in danger, should we just let it slide because they call it news? Trevor opened his mouth, but Pam cut him off, her voice unwavering. Tell me, Trevor, if someone on your staff leaked your personal financial records on air, would you call it journalism or an invasion of privacy? Trevor hesitated. The audience caught it. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Pam's eyes glinted. Exactly. Trevor exhaled through his nose, his smirk returning. All right, I see what you're doing. But let's talk about something very relevant, the upcoming election. Many people believe that Trump's administration is laying the groundwork for election interference. What do you say to that? Pam chuckled softly. I say you're being dramatic. But go on, I'm listening. Trevor leaned in. Well, let's not pretend it's a conspiracy theory. Your party has pushed for tighter election laws under the guise of security, but critics argue it's voter suppression. Can you deny that? Pam sat back, tilting her head. Trevor, let me ask you, does requiring an ID to buy alcohol suppress people from drinking? Trevor blinked. That's not the same. Pam raised an eyebrow. Why not? If you need an ID to board a plane, to buy a house, or to drive a car, how is it racist to ask for an ID to vote? The audience erupted. Some cheered wildly, while others booed just as loudly. Trevor tapped his fingers on the desk, forcing a smirk. I'll give you credit, you came prepared. Pam smiled. Trevor, you keep underestimating me. That's your first mistake. The tension in the studio was electric. And this was just the beginning. Trevor Vaughn wasn't used to being outmaneuvered on his own show. He had made a career out of catching guests off guard, leaving them flustered and scrambling for answers. But Pam Bondi? She was a different breed. Unshaken, calculated, and worst of all for him, winning. Trevor exhaled through his nose, flipping through his cue cards. The audience was watching with rapt attention, sensing that the usual smug confidence in their host was beginning to wane. All right, Trevor said, tapping his pen against the desk. Let's shift gears for a second. I want to talk about something that's been making headlines for weeks, the FBI investigations into the Trump administration's financial dealings. There are reports suggesting that some of the president's closest allies are under scrutiny for possible corruption. And yet, as Attorney General, you've been accused of blocking certain investigations from moving forward. How do you respond to that? Pam folded her hands neatly, letting the question hang in the air for a moment before answering. Well, first of all, Trevor, you say reports as if every rumor on Twitter is a fact. I assume you're referring to the so-called investigative piece from the New York Sentinel that was based entirely on anonymous sources. Trevor smirked. It's not just the New York Sentinel, Pam. Other media outlets have reported on it. Pam arched an eyebrow. Media outlets that all happen to rely on each other's unverified sources. Tell me, Trevor, if I start a rumor that you rigged last year's Emmy Awards and 3 different blogs repeat it, does that make it true? The audience chuckled, some even clapping. Trevor kept his cool, but Pam could see the flicker of frustration in his eyes. She pressed forward. But let's address your question directly. As Attorney General, my job is to enforce the law, not to entertain conspiracy theories. Every investigation has a process, and if a case lacks credible evidence, it's not blocked, it simply doesn't move forward. We don't waste taxpayer dollars chasing political revenge fantasies. Trevor leaned forward, his smirk returning. Okay, so you're saying there's nothing shady about the president's financials? Pam shrugged. I'm saying that unless someone provides actual evidence instead of gossip, I have no reason to entertain baseless accusations. And let's be real, Trevor, you don't care about the truth. You care about sound bites. The crowd reacted, some laughing, others murmuring in agreement or protest. Trevor's jaw tightened. He was losing control of the conversation, and he knew it. Time to switch tactics. Fine, he said, flipping to another card. Let's talk about something you can't spin, women's rights. Pam tilted her head. I'm listening. Trevor tapped his fingers against the desk. Your administration has taken a hardline stance against abortion rights, backing policies that restrict women's access to reproductive health care. The critics say this is about controlling women, not about protecting life. What do you say to them? Pam took a breath, glancing at the audience before answering. I say that I find it interesting how you frame this. You call it restricting women's access to health care. But what we're talking about is the right of an unborn child to live. You claim to champion human rights, but doesn't that include the most vulnerable among us? The crowd reacted loudly, some applauding, others booing. Trevor shook his head. So you're saying the government should decide what a woman can do with her own body? Pam didn't flinch. Tell me, Trevor, do you support vaccine mandates? Trevor hesitated. What does that have to do with? Pam leaned forward. A year ago, your show was pushing for people to get vaccinated, arguing that public health comes before personal choice. But when it comes to abortion, suddenly bodily autonomy is sacred. You can't have it both ways. The audience erupted. Cheers, gasps, some booing. Pam had just flipped the script. Trevor tried to regain control. Come on, Pam. That's a false equivalency. Pam smiled. Only because you don't like where it leads. Trevor ran a hand through his hair, clearly annoyed. All right, Let's talk about something everyone can agree on: gun control. Pam nodded. Go ahead. Trevor sat up straighter, eyes gleaming. Your administration has fought against stricter gun laws, despite the fact that the U.S. has more mass shootings than any other developed country. Doesn't that make you complicit in the violence? Pam sighed, shaking her head slightly. You love your buzzwords, don't you, Trevor? Complicit? That's a stretch even for you. Trevor held up a hand. Then tell me, how can you justify blocking common-sense measures like universal background checks? Pam didn't hesitate. Trevor, do you know how many background checks were conducted in just the past year? Trevor blinked. Over 40 million. Pam cut in. Do you know how many criminals were stopped from buying a gun because of background checks? Trevor hesitated. Pam didn't wait. Hundreds of thousands. Background checks already exist. The problem isn't law-abiding citizens. It's that criminals don't follow laws. Do you really think a mass shooter is going to stop and say, "Oh no, I was going to commit a felony, but this new background check law stopped me"? Trevor exhaled sharply, struggling to maintain his composure. The audience was a mix of applause and protests, the debate now a full-on war of words. Pam continued, You want to talk about real solutions? Why not address mental health? Why not prosecute gun crimes to the fullest extent instead of letting violent offenders walk free? But I get it. You'd rather blame the law-abiding gun owner in Ohio than the repeat felon in New York who just got released under soft-on-crime policies. The crowd exploded, this time more cheers than boos. Trevor opened his mouth, but Pam lifted a hand. I'll give you a second to collect your thoughts. The audience went wild. Trevor clenched his jaw. This was not going the way he had planned. Pam sat back, smiling sweetly. You look like you need a commercial break. The audience erupted again, clapping, cheering, some even standing. Trevor forced a chuckle. Oh, we're not done yet, Pam. Not even close. Pam smirked. Good. I'd hate for this to be too easy. Trevor Vaughn's fingers drummed against the desk. The studio lights burned overhead, the cameras locked in on his face as he forced a tight smile. Pam Bondi had wrecked his usual script, twisting his own tactics against him. He needed to regain control. He leaned forward. Okay, Pam. Since you're clearly enjoying this, let's get serious. Let's talk about the thing that has everyone talking, the Supreme Court scandal. The audience reacted, whispers, gasps, anticipation thick in the air. Pam arched an eyebrow. Scandal? You mean the process of confirming justices? Trevor smirked. Oh, come on, don't play dumb. Your administration rushed through a Supreme Court appointment just before the last election, blocking hearings for a nominee when the previous administration tried to do the same. The hypocrisy is staggering. Was that about democracy or just power? Pam exhaled sharply. I love this argument, it's so convenient. Let's set the record straight, shall we? Trevor folded his arms. By all means. Pam leaned forward slightly, eyes locked onto his. In 2016, President Obama nominated a Supreme Court justice during an election year, something that hadn't happened successfully in over a century. The Senate, under its constitutional right, chose not to confirm. That's not a scandal, Trevor. That's politics. Trevor scoffed. And yet, when it was your administration's turn, you shoved a justice through in record time? Pam tilted her head. You mean the same process that has been used historically when one party controls both the White House and the Senate? Funny how you only call it rushed when you don't like the outcome. Trevor opened his mouth, but Pam continued. And let's be honest, Trevor, if the roles were reversed, you and your audience would be cheering. This isn't about ethics. It's about losing a political battle and wanting to rewrite the rules after the fact. The crowd reacted, some booing but more clapping. The tension had shifted. Trevor's smirk faltered. His eyes flicked to the side, his mind scrambling for his next move. He needed something to turn the audience against her. He took a deep breath. All right, Pam. Let's drop all the policy talk for a second. I want to ask you something personal. Pam nodded, unbothered. Go ahead. Trevor's voice turned serious. How does it feel to be the face of a controversial administration? Everywhere you go, you face protests. You get heckled in public. People say you're selling out your integrity for power. Doesn't that ever get to you? Pam didn't blink. No. Trevor's smile twitched. Really? Not even a little. Pam shrugged. Trevor, if I cared about what Twitter mobs thought, I wouldn't have this job. You act like being disliked is some kind of failure. Let me remind you, Every major political figure in history has been hated by somebody. That's the price of standing for something. Trevor's grin turned sharp. And what exactly do you stand for, Pam? Blind loyalty to Trump. Pam's expression hardened slightly. I stand for the Constitution, for the rule of law, for the idea that feelings don't override facts. The audience murmured. Trevor pressed harder. So you don't regret any of your decisions? Pam shook her head. No. Trevor chuckled, shaking his head. Unbelievable. I mean, really? Pam cut him off. No, what's unbelievable is how you sit here, night after night, pretending to be some moral authority while pushing misleading narratives to millions of people. The crowd stirred louder now. Trevor's jaw tightened. Excuse me? Pam's voice remained calm but piercing. Let's be real, Trevor. This isn't about policy. This isn't about justice. This is about entertainment. You don't actually care about the truth, you care about headlines. Your whole career is built on twisting facts just enough to make a viral clip. The audience gasped. Trevor blinked. He wasn't used to being on the defensive. Pam leaned in. So tell me, Trevor, what do you really believe? Or does it just depend on whatever gets the most clicks? The studio fell silent. Trevor sat still, his mind racing. He had never been hit like this before. The cameras were rolling. The audience was watching every second. For the first time in a long time, Trevor Vaughn had nothing to say. Pam smiled. Yeah, that's what I thought. The audience erupted. And the comeback wasn't even over yet. The crowd's reaction was deafening. Applause, cheers, and even some stunned silence from Trevor Vaughn's most loyal viewers. Pam Bondi sat back in her chair, cool and composed, while Trevor struggled to maintain his usual smirk. He wasn't used to being called out like this. Trevor cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. All right, Pam, you've made your points, but let's not pretend that your side is innocent either. Your administration thrives on controversy. You stir the pot just as much as anyone else. Pam nodded, unimpressed. Politics isn't a tea party, Trevor. Of course, there's controversy. But unlike you, we're not in the business of manufacturing outrage for views. Trevor exhaled through his nose, trying to regain control. All right, let's wrap this up with a simple question. What do you say to the people who hate you? The ones who say you're corrupt? That you're a liar? That you're nothing more than a mouthpiece for a president they despise? Pam's response was instant. I say, thank you. Trevor blinked. What? Pam shrugged. I mean it. If people hate me for doing my job, then that means I'm making an impact. I don't wake up in the morning worrying about being liked. I wake up wondering how to uphold the law even when it's unpopular. Trevor leaned back, shaking his head. So you don't care about your public image at all? Pam chuckled. Oh, I care. But not in the way you think. See, Trevor, people like you measure success by how many people love you. I measure it by how many people respect me even when they don't agree with me. The audience erupted again. Trevor opened his mouth, but Pam wasn't finished. And one more thing. Trevor sighed. Oh boy. Here we go. Pam smirked. You asked me earlier what it's like to be the face of a controversial administration. Well, let me ask you something, Trevor. Trevor narrowed his eyes. What? Pam leaned in slightly. What's it like being afraid of the truth? The audience gasped. Trevor scoffed, trying to brush it off. Afraid? Of what? Pam tilted her head. Of real debate. Of letting people think for themselves instead of spoon-feeding them what you want them to believe. You act like you're a champion of free speech, but the second someone pushes back, you panic. Trevor rolled his eyes. Oh, come on, Pam. Pam held up a hand. No, seriously. Watch this. She turned to the audience. How many of you disagree with me? A large portion of the audience raised their hands. Pam nodded. That's fine. And how many of you think Trevor shuts down real discussion in favor of gotcha moments? Another chunk of the audience raised their hands louder this time. Trevor's face went pale. Pam turned back to him. See? People aren't stupid. They know when they're being manipulated. The audience erupted again, this time louder than before. Trevor forced a laugh, trying to play it off. Well, Pam, this has been enlightening. Pam grinned. For both of us. The cameras zoomed in as Trevor forced his signature smile. Pam Bondi, ladies and gentlemen. The applause was deafening. Pam stood up, shook his hand, and walked off the set, leaving Trevor Vaughn sitting there, defeated. As the credits rolled, one thing was clear. Pam Bondi didn't just survive the interview. She owned it.